Thank you, Deb, and I want to start by thanking my colleague and fellow NJPP policy analyst Naomi Bressler for her assistance in writing this paper. Also, thank you to Deb, our president, and NJPP research director Mary Forsberg for editing the paper. ERG, the Economic Redevelopment and Growth Grant Program, which is a really long name, is a developer subsidy. And before I start flipping through slides, I want to just point out these two pictures. On the right is the fancy, shiny new office tower that Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation got a over $14 million ERG grant for. It also got several other subsidies from the state, county, and the city, which amounted to over $100 million in subsidies. And it's the first project to get an ERG grant. So these two pictures really, well, let me say, the picture on the left is the half-constructed Revel Casino in Atlantic City. Ben, I think it's sort of an older picture, right? Ben Begleiter is here from Atlantic City. But it was the only state grant to be proposed, but not approved. And it was also the largest that has come through the sort of ERG pipeline with it being a $300 million grant. Anyway, so these two pictures sort of tell us something about the first year of the ERG program. Now, like Deb said, we think there's good things about ERG and bad things, and we'll talk about that. But first, I just want to sort of explain, so ERG is a type of tax increment financing, or TIF. And I'm sure many people know what that is, but I just want to quickly talk about it. So tax increment financing diverts increased tax revenues away from public services and goes back to developers. So the increment isn't available to fund public services like our schools, transportation, libraries. And sort of how would it work sort of in practice? So let's say we have a underutilized parcel of land. Maybe there's a factory sitting there. That has a pretty low tax assessment. A developer comes in, wants to rebuild on that site, and the state or a municipality says, all right, we'll give you a TIF subsidy to help with that redevelopment. So then the new building goes up, the tax assessment goes up, and then you have the original tax assessment for the old factory property, and you have the new tax assessment for the new building, and the difference is the increment, and that is what goes back into the pocket of the developer and not to public services. Now, there have been several versions of TIF over the years in New Jersey. The law that immediately preceded, came right before ERG, were revenue allocation districts. And Hannah and Kim will both be speaking about that some. So that law was in effect for 8 years, and in that 8-year time, only one district was approved, and that was the district in Millville that Kim will talk about. And some really good public purposes were pursued there with housing redevelopment. One of the really good things about RAD that ERG does not have is that RAD allowed the creation of a district where you could have, a property that was generating the increments, like at the shopping center in Millville. But then some of that money could be given to struggling areas and to help work through any problems that those struggling areas were having. It's focused on wider redevelopment. So that all, and the ability to have that kind of district ended last year in 2009. ERG was part of a larger package that former Governor Corzine signed on July 28th, 2009. The law actually had just millions and millions of dollars worth of subsidies, and it was passed in the space of 2 weeks with no fiscal estimate, no estimate of the impact it would have on the state and local and municipalities. Then, a year after it was initially signed, it was changed by a bill that basically eliminated the right of local officials to vote on a state grant. So let's say Depository Trust, for example, comes to Jersey City. Right now, Jersey City, or another financial company comes to Jersey City and they want to locate there and they want a state grant for it. Jersey City couldn't say, or Jersey City officials couldn't say, well, we don't want that. The impetus for this change came from the controversy around the Revel Casino, which was spearheaded by community groups and Unite Here, and Ben will talk about that more later. And the casino just, the Casino Workers Union didn't think it was a great use of public resources in Atlantic City. And they worked against it, and so did other groups. And to sort of evade that kind of local outcry, the sponsors of the bill, the sponsors of ERG, passed the second bill. Now, so there's certain really notable features that we think are the bad part of ERG, and I'll talk about that. One is that it allows 19 state and local revenues to be diverted back to developers. In any given project, there's sort of this, as Deb said, like a buffet of different revenues that can be taken away. And some of them are our most important taxes, like the corporation business tax, the sales tax, which is a fairly unusual thing to be available for, to be diverted in a TIF. A portion of our gross income tax, not our entire gross income tax, this is an important thing to note, but only the portion that would flow through, that would be relevant to an S corp, where a business owner has their income reported, their business income reported on their personal income tax. So, and then some of our most important local taxes, like the property tax. I mean, this is what funds schools, and it's hugely important in New Jersey and a huge issue. But it could be diverted away from our school districts, so it wouldn't be there, the increment wouldn't be there to pay for teachers and textbooks and all the things that our schools need. Also, pilots can be diverted. So, and this, having 19 revenues available makes us the most generous in terms of what we will give away to developers of any state, in terms of the number of revenues. Another bad feature in our view is that the diversion is available for up to 20 years. And this was part of this program, was passed as part of a short-term stimulus bill. 20 years is not short-term. It's a long-term diversion from our schools and from state programs. And one of the things that has not been widely reported, and that we sort of looked at in depth, is that it can go to it's available in 80% of municipalities. It was talked about as like this targeted program that was really just for urban areas, but it's not. 451 of our 566 municipalities, 80%, at least 80%, could be home to an ERG grant. And it can go to places like Montclair, Princeton Borough, Princeton Township, not places known to be economically struggling. And this next slide you're not meant to read, but just to give you a sense of the sheer volume of places that can get an ERG. It's staggering. And this is actually a conservative estimate. There are certain areas in the program that can also get ERG that aren't sort of in our, what's called the state plan, like 15% of the Pinelands is also available for an ERG. But you can just see it's staggering. So in the first year of the program, 5 state grants have been approved. Now the first 3, we would sort of argue that the state didn't need to subsidize because they would have probably been there without the subsidy, or they have enough resources on their own to be there without the subsidy, or it's just not needed in that area. Depository Trust, it's located right near the waterfront, in Jersey City's Gold Coast. Embassy Suites Hotel in Elizabeth, it's in an area with a lot of hotels already. Why do we need to subsidize that? Why does the state need to subsidize that? The strip mall in East Brunswick, it's in an area that's saturated with retail. One of the stores that moved to this shopping mall came from 3 miles away. Then there have been grants that are for struggling areas or areas that don't have needed retail amenities. The Sacred ShopRite, for instance, is locating in Somerville where there isn't a grocery store. And there hasn't been for 3 years. So it's a needed amenity. In Newark, certainly a place that needs redevelopment. We talked about how Revel was I talked about how Revel was applied for grants, and but those grants were not approved. The newest grant, the newest project that's looking for a subsidy is Xanadu, something that many of us are familiar with and has been financially troubled. It's sort of turned, as we know, it's kind of turned from a resort-style facility to a 1 million square foot shopping mall. And the Bergen Record reported that the Christie administration is considering about $180 million in diverted sales tax to allow Xanadu to be completed. But you know, it's in a retail saturated corridor. Does the state need to be spending, you know, tax dollars that could be going to public services on another huge mall? Now I talked about all the bad things. Some of the good things about ERG, it's a reimbursement program. The developer won't get those diverted tax revenues until after their project is up and running. So there's still a diversion, but the project actually has to be there. It's not, many states will just hand money over, or municipalities will hand money over upfront without seeing that the project is underway. There are initial project evaluations required of each project. However, there is not a overall program, there's no overall requirement that the program be evaluated. Something that is particularly good is that the property tax can only be diverted in a true redevelopment area. And that's an area where the town has said, we have a redevelopment plan, we've thought it through. So the property tax cannot go to a place that has not been developed previously. And that's an important thing. Talked about all of this. So the paper outlines some best practices. These are some of them. In our view, ERG should only be used for economically struggling areas. New York State does something very good. It protects its non-school portion of the property tax. It only diverts the property tax in its TIF program, but it takes a subset of that tax. It's just what doesn't go to the schools. Instead of not listening to local officials and not letting them have a say over state grants, we think the local officials, the state, and the county, the school should all sit together and decide on each grant. That sounds difficult, but it's been done in other states. And we definitely think that ERG should be evaluated every year as a whole. The program as a whole should be looked at to see if it's bringing what it says it will, jobs and investment. And we think it should be going to economically struggling areas.